Good morning, guys. Welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. I hope you guys are all doing great. I hope you are all busy getting everything ready for this season. I know we have been super busy here. We are on our third round of chicks that we're getting ready to hatch out now. Our goats are doing really great. So Peaches is my one goat who's pregnant. She is going to kid around June 18th, so we're getting excited for that. She's getting very wide, and so we're really excited. I'm hoping that she gives me some girls this year because she is just such an excellent dairy goat. Easy births, tons and tons of milk, just she's like the golden goat. Nothing ever happens to that goat. She's just perfect. There's no problems with her. So I'm hoping she gives me some girls this year that I can keep. Our pigs are also getting really big. They're going to be ready to be dealt with in about 3 to 4 weeks. So we're still feeding them out and they are just getting super big. So they'll be gone shortly. And I am really itching to plant things out. So for the last, I feel like 3 to 4 weeks, we have been so warm. Our nighttime temperatures have been in the 50s and 60s, and it has been so incredibly tempting to plant things out before my average last frost date. And I typically plant out a couple of weeks after that. And for my peppers, I make sure that those nighttime temperatures are 50 or above because peppers don't like that colder weather. They can't do some of that synthesizing and things that they need to do when it drops below 50 degrees, and so you can stunt your pepper. So I always make sure I'm above that 50-degree threshold for them. But it's been incredibly tempting to kind of get a jump start on everything. And the forecast has been fantastic. But lo and behold, I was watching it, everything looked great, and then all of a sudden, one night, the next day I see that we're going to be dropping down and getting a frost that next night. It changed instantaneously on that 10-day forecast. And so you always have to be super careful that you're not planting out before that average last frost date, no matter how tempting it is. A lot of people in my area did that, and they either had to protect their plants or they lost their plants, and now they're having to go replace them. So I'm glad I didn't get a jump start on it, but today I am going to be direct sowing a lot of things since we are pretty much in the clear at this point. Things like my cucumbers, squash, green beans, those are all frost sensitive, but they're going to take about 4 to 5 days maybe to pop up, and we're really past that frost point at this time. So we're going to be doing really good there. We've been working on our orchard. We have the trenches that Nate had dug to put irrigation in, so that's all done. So the kids and I have been working to fill in those trenches. That's kind of thankless work. It's pretty difficult, and the kids are moaning and groaning as we're up there, but we're getting it done. And so one more day up there and we should be done with that. But I've got some plants that are still hardening off. I have this big 4-tier shelf that I just kind of roll out of the garage, put it in the sun during the day, and then roll that back in at night so that the deer don't get it, or if it's getting too cold, I can roll it back in to protect those things. So that's been really easy to harden everything off this year. But I had that out in my driveway the other day. My parents came to visit, and for some reason my dad thought that he would back up to the garage bay. And as he did, I'm walking out to say hi because it was an unexpected visit. And he's getting so close to this shelving unit, I had to yell. He didn't even see it there. He almost hit it. So I almost lost all that food. But I'm so glad that we didn't, because we are on track to produce so much food this year between the garden, the orchard that'll come in a couple of years, but we do have our established fruit tree area back there with like 60 blueberries out there, and we've just got a lot going on, and we're going to be bringing in a ton of food, so I'm super excited about that. And that's one thing that we do try to do here, is we try to be producers and not consumers. Now, if you're like the majority of Americans, you are probably a consumer. You need a constant supply of things that you're getting from outside sources to keep your life running smoothly. Everything from, let's say, social media, right? How much time are we spending on our phone? How much are we consuming for whatever comes through our screens on that phone? Do you guys realize that the average teenager is on their phones over 8 hours a day? And adults are not any better at 7 hours a day. That's just astounding to me. You know, when I go out, we go to our kids' sports games. You know, you've got little siblings there that are just on screens the whole time. You go to Walmart, you know, the kids in the cart, they all have their iPads and their headphones and their phones. And I think, man, how much are we putting into our kids' minds? You know, the whole world is open to them. But anyways, that's a side note there. But as far as consuming, right? The average American is going to the grocery store once a week to restock their pantry, right? If you need new socks, new shirts, new pants, you're bringing that in from an outside source. If you want a new car, if you want, maybe the toaster broke, right? It's not worth our time anymore to repair that. We're just going to go buy a new one. For so many decades now, we have just become addicted to just bringing everything in and not producing anything. And most of those goods are coming from China. Yep, go into any Walmart, any store really, the majority of those goods are from China. You want to shop on Amazon, a lot of those are from China. In fact, right now with the tariffs, they were saying that 3 out of 5 Chinese suppliers to Amazon are just going to up their prices. 2 in 5 are just going to leave the market completely because it's just getting so difficult to sell their products over there. So get ready for some price hikes there, and get ready for maybe some supply chain issues. I'm not sure. But now there's also DHgate, there's Temu, there's Alibaba, AliExpress, right? You can get all of that stuff from China super, super cheap. But I think that's going to slow down a little bit. I don't know how long these tariffs are going to last. But even if it does cost increased prices, is that a big deal? Maybe we'll just pay more for them. Maybe we'll decide not to consume as much. Or maybe we'll just find another country that's willing to come to the table and supply that for us at a cheap rate. I think you've all seen that most of the countries that we were imposing tariffs on have kind of come to the table to make some deals with the president, except for China. And so maybe those things are not really a big deal, but I'm going to tell you what is a big deal. Do you guys realize how dependent we are on China for drugs, for pharmaceuticals? They are essentially our drug dealer. And the amount of American people that take regular prescription drugs is astronomical. We fill 6 billion prescriptions a year. Does that not blow your mind? 19 prescriptions per person per year. So that's sort of like your one routine monthly refill that you're getting, that daily pill that you're taking. Maybe that's for diabetes, maybe that's for cholesterol, maybe it is for, allergies, who knows? And then on top of that, you get 7 bonus prescriptions per year. So antibiotics, ointments, antifungals, those shorter term prescriptions. But it's just crazy to me. And, you might think, well, geez, I don't really take prescription medications, so that really probably won't affect me. But let me tell you what will affect you. 1 in 5 U.S. adolescents have a diagnosed mental health disorder. The number 1 diagnosed mental health disorder for our adolescents is anxiety, followed by depression, followed by behavioral disorders. Those are our children. I can't believe that number. That's 20% of our children have a mental disorder that they're taking mind-altering drugs for. And most of those drugs are coming from China. 1 in 6 U.S. adults are on mental health medication as well. And if you can believe it, 35% of our population takes drugs to control their cholesterol, those drugs that are called statins, right? Atorvastatin, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, that is the number 1 prescribed drug in America. Also, 1 in 8 adults has taken a GLP-1 or Ozempic. You cannot go anywhere without hearing an ad for that, seeing it on your phone, on your TV. Even Weight Watchers is now saying, Weight Watchers, they were always the company that was about, losing weight, keeping it off, changing your lifestyle habits, and now they're advertising Ozempic or GLP-1 drugs to help you lose that weight. Now that drug was originally made for diabetics, but they're now using it for weight loss. It has skyrocketed in use 700%. That is absolutely crazy. If you want to lose weight, if you want to get off your cholesterol medication, I suggest that you homestead. I used to work out every single day from the time that I was in high school and was doing sports every day, cross country, soccer, all of those things, until I was, in my early 40s when we moved to this property. I worked out every single day. I would run every single day just to keep in shape. To make sure that I was the size that I wanted to be. And since we have come here and since we have been down in that garden working and just doing so much manual labor and of course eating that healthy food, I've not had to work out one day since we've been here. And I am thinner now than I have ever been. I'm healthier now than I have ever been. So if you want to get off those medications, of course, I'm not a doctor. You obviously need to talk to your doctor, but I'm just saying this might help. But back to my point, we are so incredibly reliant on China. And you know, if your child gets sick and you're running to Walgreens or Walmart pharmacy to get them that antibiotic, don't you always love that generic antibiotic, the one that's like $7 or $8? China supplies 90% of those to America. 90%. And of the non-generic name brand ones, 80% of those come from overseas. So China produces 60% of those, and then India produces 20% of those antibiotics. So think about back to 2020. Of course, COVID was a virus, and viruses are a little bit different than bacteria. But what if the next major thing that accidentally happens, the next pandemic, what if it, you know, could be solved with an antibacterial? Our relationship right now with China is not great. I would say we're pretty much on bad terms. Hearing what they've said, you know, China will fight to the end. You know, their whole government over there is just like, we don't care about America. Do what you need to do, we're going to survive. Meanwhile, I've been watching videos of the people over there that are really struggling because they're having to close down their companies. People in the US have been canceling orders, so these companies have already purchased all the goods, all the raw materials, they're making this stuff, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're canceling these orders because it's just too expensive to bring it in here, and so the Chinese people are having to bear the brunt of that. So it's really hurting them, but their government is pretty certain that they do not want to deal with us, they don't want to make a deal, they don't want to talk. They don't want to be fair in their tariffs and things like that. And so I think that things could get pretty rough if we were relying on them for a drug that could save our lives in the instance of a pandemic. Of course, most Americans do rely on China to keep them living. And it's just really crazy. You know, drug use or prescription drug use, a lot of those mental health drugs that I talked about, that's increased like 35% within the last decade for children anyways. I think the cholesterol medications have also gone up about 30% in the last few years. That use, of course, Ozempic, like I said, that's a 700% increase. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do when those drugs get turned off? And if you're not using them, what are you going to do when those mental health drugs get turned off for our adolescents and for our adults? For those people that are using those to calm them, right? Anxiety, depression, behavioral issues. Or what about for the more severe things, right? Like schizophrenia, right? Like those really, really top tier mental disorders. What are you going to do when society starts to go crazy? Well, one of the things that we do here is we grow medicinal herbs. So behind me here is one of my medicinal herb gardens, and we grow a good amount of things that we use. Now, I'm not one to say grow everything. I kind of like to grow one or two new things every year, and I learn what that does. I learn how to grow it, how to preserve it, how to use it, and then we use it inside and see if it works for us. If it doesn't work, then I'm not gonna buy it. You know, it's like essential oils. They say, oh, buy all these kits of essential oils and things like that. I find that most of those don't work. You know, we might use a lavender essential oil for a burn or something like that. And then there is one allergy one that really, I mean, it's better than Zyrtec. It's better than any drug you can buy. I love it. It's from Plant Therapy, and it's called Sneezy Stop. Anytime you get that itchy throat, itchy nose, watery eyes, itchy eyes, just any allergies, that thing knocks it out for every single one of us in my family. But really, those are the only two that we use. But back to the herb garden here. So I typically just grow one or two new ones every year, and I learn those. And then I just increase my vocabulary of what we have and what I know how to use. But a lot of the things that we're using here and growing here are things like echinacea. So echinacea is a great immune booster. We make a tincture out of that. So you're just taking that dried leaf, the dried flower, the dried root, and we kind of just crush that all up or chop it all up, and we're putting that in a jar, covering it with vodka that's at least 100 proof, and we just let that sit. And then when that's done, we strain it out. And at the first sign of a cold or a cough or any type of sickness, we are taking, like a quarter teaspoon of that a couple times a day. So that's what's called a tincture. And it boosts your immune system. And that really helps to knock things out before they get settled in. Another thing that I grow that I have in my herb garden right now is something called marshmallow. So marshmallow has sort of like this thick kind of goopy stuff. It's called mucilage, and it's just very protective of your esophagus, of your stomach. So it's really good for those dry coughs. It's good to soothe a sore throat. It's good for protecting from ulcers. So think like heartburn, stomach issues. Also calendula. I love calendula. That's called pot marigold. Now that is something that we use. I dry it. I go ahead and I put it in oil, and I infuse that oil with the calendula over time. And then what we do with that is we strain that calendula out, and then I make a salve out of it using some beeswax and things like that. So it's sort of like a meltable, little makeup tin that we have. You pour it in there, it hardens, but as soon as you put a little heat on it, it kind of melts. And we use that salve in place of any type of antibiotic ointment. That has actually been shown in studies to get rid of MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. That's a big deal in hospitals right now where the penicillins won't touch that bacteria, but calendula has actually been shown to be effective against that. So any type of salve for that. It's also good as a tea if you're fighting things in your bowel like Crohn's or colitis or anything like that. So it helps with that anti-inflammatory, those anti-inflammatory properties really help with those. Another thing that we have here is mullein. That's really good for respiratory issues. I'm also growing some horehound. If you are a little bit older, you may have seen horehound cough drops. That's how we like to use our horehound for coughs and colds and things like that. Also lemon balm. If you guys have ever smelled lemon balm, it is such a beautiful scent. It's lemony, it's wonderful, and it's very relaxing. Lemon balm is really good in a tea for relaxation at night if you can't stop your mind from turning. They've also had recent studies that lemon balm tincture helps you lose weight. So if you want to try that instead of maybe doing the Ozempic injections at $1,000 a pop, you could try that instead. Also for anxiety, there's something called blue vervain. So blue vervain is really, really good for people who are type A, like me. You kind of like to be in control. You don't like any type of upset to your schedule. You kind of want to know what's going to happen, and you tend to worry about things. So that is definitely me. So blue vervain is a great anti-anxiety. And then for years, of course, St. John's wort for depression. I'm not growing that one here. But that's another one. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can see what works for your family. Of course, like I said before, I'm not a doctor, so talk to your doctor if you're on a medication before you're stopping it or anything like that. But this is just a great way to kind of expand your repertoire, learn a new skill, and help to provide for your family. Because if China decides that they want to cut us off, that is one way that they can really hurt us. I'm okay with spending more money for my toasters or spending more money for my clothes, but if I can't get an antibiotic or something that is going to cure a sickness or something very serious in my family, I would be extremely worried about that. So anyways, guys, just some things to think about today, but I've got to get down to the garden. I'm going to be direct sowing a lot of things like cucumbers, some melons, squashes, zucchini, all of that fun stuff that I don't grow inside because it grows too fast. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you have a great rest of your day.